Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'd like to introduce tonight's guest host, Mr. Ed Miller. Welcome.
Good evening. I see most of you have your brews, so we will have the views in a little while. As you know, I play and perform Scottish music in Texas. What we have on stage for you tonight are people who play Texas music in Scotland. So we kind of got the other side. We have Duncan Mclean here, who has been here in Texas before. He came here. I had the pleasure of interviewing him when he was advertising a book that he wrote after wandering around this huge state for several weeks and trying to find people who were involved in the roots of Western swing music. And he wrote a great book, which I recommend, called Lonestar Swing, Duncan Mclean. Before I introduce Duncan, however, I want to say that the performer, that the show that is on at the Bass Concert Hall for the next 3 nights, came from Shetland, and that is a group of islands way to the north of Scotland. In fact, it's so far north, it's about halfway between Scotland and Norway. And the culture, in fact, represents that. It is partly Norse. They've only been part of Scotland since the 15th century, so they're still trying to adapt to our ways. Out of interest, I put up a map of Scotland, and as with most maps of Scotland, Shetland is in a small box at the top right-hand corner. However, that small one above it is a map of Shetland that has a small box with Scotland in the bottom right-hand corner. But that's about roughly where it would be on scale with the map that is below it. So we're not talking about, we're talking about a place that is a long way from what most Scots would regard as civilization, but which has a very strong culture of its own. I remember Ali Bain from Shetland, when he first came to play in a festival in the Lowlands, he said, well, this is the first time I've ever been to Scotland. Now, we all assumed that Shetland was part of Scotland, but apparently in the Shetland mind, it's not. Duncan Mclean is a writer. As I mentioned, he's also a sometime actor. And he is also, as you will hear in a little while, a very good musician. He's also the playwright who has written for production for the Scottish National Theatre a wonderful piece called Long Gone Lonesome, about a musician from the Shetland Islands. And that's who we're going to talk about first of all, to give you an introduction to why he's here, why this group is here, and what is going to be staged at the Bass Concert Hall tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday. So welcome to Duncan Mclean.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Can you give us a background of how Thomas Fraser came to hear the kind of music that he played, how he came to record it, and maybe after that, how you came to be aware of his music?
Well, Thomas Fraser was born in Shetland, not even the mainland of Shetland, but a tiny island called Burgh off the west coast. He was born there in 1927. That was a tiny rocky island, no farmland at all. The only way to make a living was by fishing. So he grew up in a very tough community there. You know, sudden death from the sea was just around the corner at every turn. If you didn't go to the fishing, what you might do is go and work in the merchant navy. And one of Thomas's uncles, his Uncle Walter, joined the merchant navy. He was away for months at a time, but when he returned from Canada and America, he brought home very special gifts, thick black shellac discs that spun around at 78 revolutions per minute. These were songs by Jimmy Rogers, the blue yodeling brakeman. This was in the late 1930s, early 40s, and it's hard to imagine now, in this world we're in that is so interconnected by phones and mobiles and internet and email, it's hard to imagine how alien a sound Jimmy Rogers was when he appeared on a disc in Burgh in the late 1930s. It really was an unworldly sound. What is that weird warbling noise he makes? What's he singing about? We don't understand the words. What is that thing he's strumming in his hands? We've never seen one of those before. But for some reason, this alien sound, as strange as the music of the natives of Jupiter landing on our soil today, as weird as that, it hooked Thomas. He was absolutely fell in love with this stuff. He saved any penny he could get his hands on to send away by mail order to order Jimmy Rogers records. Sometimes it would take months for them to come home. And also, most remarkably, he managed to get hold of a guitar from another brother who was a seaman too. He taught himself to play Jimmy Rogers music, and he taught himself to sing, and he taught himself to yodel as well, most remarkably. And these days, everyone does that. I did that. But in Shetland in 1945, it was like learning nuclear fission in your kitchen sink. It was astonishing. He was a shy man by nature, and the fact that no one around there appreciated or even understood his music meant he didn't perform in public with his stuff. Very, 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 very rarely, a handful of times in his whole life. What he did was he recorded hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tracks on a reel-to-reel tape recorder. He couldn't do this till the mid-50s, because up till then there'd been no electricity in the islands. But when it reached there, the first thing he bought, wasn't anything useful like an electric kettle or a light. It was a reel-to-reel tape recorder. Cost him several months' wages. For the rest of his life, he shut himself away in his croft. When he wasn't fishing, he was recording himself singing hundreds and hundreds of Jimmy Rogers songs, Hank Snow, Hank Williams, Carol Smith. He was a good Shetland fiddler in the old tradition too, but the country stuff was his passion. There was something about these songs of lonely boys on the prairie and sailing down the Mississippi. There was something about these lone heroes wandering through a lonely, tough world that appealed to his sensibility.
I have noticed that as well, that for pub singers in particular in Scotland, that the gods really are not Scottish singers. If you think you're going to go to a pub on a Friday night and hear lovely old ballads, then dream on. But if you know some Jim Reeves songs, you'll get drinks bought for you all night. So they just sing them a bit differently than what they do here. Yeah. Can we hear an example then?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're delighted to.
Well, please, if you could introduce the musicians with you. I know we have
Do I
an
have to?
Englishman,
Do I
we have
have
a Shetlander, and an Orcadian.
We'll start with Orcadian. On the double bass, it's Mr. Double Whiskies all round, Ian Tate. On the fiddle, from Shetland, in fact she lives in a house about a quarter of a mile where Thomas Fraser spent his whole life, is Linda Anderson. And last, but not baldest, on electric mandolin and lap steel guitar, Dick Levins. We thought we'd do what you might call the theme tune to the show. It's a very familiar tune, but we do it in a kind of unusual way. I went down to the river to watch the fair swim by. When I got to the river, so lonesome I wanted to die. So I jumped in the river, but the doggone river was dry. Long gone, long gone. She's long gone. I got the lonesome blues. I'm gonna find me a river, one that's cold as ice. And when I find me that river, Lord, I'm gonna pay the price. I'm going down in it 3 times, Lord, I'm only coming up twice.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase bringing coals to Newcastle before. Tell me about how you've discovered Thomas Fraser yourself, and what inspired you to write a whole play about it.
Well, Thomas died young at the age of 50 following an accident at sea. In fact, that song we just played, we use it at the point in his life story where he's just had his big accident, hence the melancholy nature of it. For 25 years after he died, all these hundreds of reel-to-reel tapes he'd made just sat mouldering in an old suitcase in a relation's spare bedroom. And it was only when his grandson, a dyed-in-the-wool fan of Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, discovered these tapes and listened to them with no great expectation. He knew his granddad had played the guitar a bit, but so what? When he listened to him, he realized this was a man with, not just with an amazing voice, an amazing ability to communicate emotion in his song, a quite unique talent. So Carl Simpson started preserving these tapes and getting the best of them issued on CDs. It was after the first of these came out, about 10 years ago now. I rushed out to get it. It was right up my street. Certainly the finest country music record ever made by a British person. So a few years after that, the National Theatre of Scotland got wind of the Thomas Fraser story, and they approached me, being somebody who lived up there and loved this music and was a writer. They said, do you think there's something in this? Do you think we could make a show out of this? Well, I went away and talked to Thomas's daughter, who's still alive, grandson, people who played music with him, people who worked in the fishing boats with him. And the story was even more interesting than I had gathered up to that point. The man was a mass of contradictions. He was a genuinely good man. He was a genuinely great artist. But he really struggled his whole life long, various crosses to bear. But in the end, I think he triumphed over his adversity, produced some really great music.
Do you think that he had a kind of secret desire that these would be later discovered, that he might actually become a well-known performer?
Almost everything in his life would lead you to think he had no interest at all in that. But literally a month before he died, he asked his nephew, Bobby, to look after his tapes for him. And he said these words, "You better look after my tapes, Bobby. You never can. I might be famous someday."
And here we are in Austin, Texas. Little did Woody know. I can think of several musicians here in Austin who would love to have got together with him. I remember, maybe some of you remember Bill Neely or Kenneth Threadgill, and some of the great old characters of Austin music. I can just see him sitting in with them and playing, and some of the old fiddle players from the Bob Wills band that Jesse, forget his name, Ashlock used to finish his days here playing, and he would have just loved to have played with this man. I know, it's great. So tell me yourself though, you're brought up in northeast of Scotland, you lived in Edinburgh and you lived in Orkney as you do now. How did you personally get so fascinated with Texas or Western swing or country music as a whole?
I told you that 12 years ago when we last met.
But they weren't here.
You mentioned it earlier on. If you grow up in Scotland, country music is your other national music, really. You might have bothy ballads or fiddle tunes, but all the time there's an undercurrent of Johnny Cash and Loretta Lynn and folk like that. So I grew up hearing all that stuff. You know, a lot of the roots of country music do lie in Scotland and Ireland anyway, certainly in the fiddling tradition and the ballad tradition. So there's a very, very easy connection to make between us and Scotland and the music that's produced over here. I grew up with all that stuff. I went through a teenage phase of detesting it, or thinking I did, or pretending that I did. But when I was in my 20s, I started to get into it, and not just the well-known names I already knew. You know, say I quite liked I don't know, Dwight Yoakam, that would lead me on to Buck Owens, and Buck Owens would lead me on to Lefty Frizzell, and Lefty Frizzell led me on to Hank. You know, and I've just got this mind that goes back in time and likes to follow up where things came from. And one fateful day in a second-hand record store in Edinburgh, Vinyl Villains on Leith Walk, I came across a double LP of a record by Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. In my ignorance, I thought the name of the band was the daftest name I'd ever heard for a band. Playboy was a magazine to me, you know. It wasn't a bunch of musicians. I thought, well, it's a kind of old country band. It's the kind of thing I should try. I took it home, no great expectations, put it on, and from that second I was transfixed. It changed my life, And this was in the days, hard for some of you studenty folk to believe this, before the internet. If you lived in Scotland and you loved Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, you didn't know what to do. What do you do next? You go to every second-hand record shop you can find. You look through the racks, nothing. You go to the library, nothing. Then you find an encyclopedia of country music, and there's a little one paragraph about Bob Wills. He played something called Western Swing. So you look up another paragraph about Western Swing, and that mentions Milton Brown and Hank Thompson and Adolph Hoffner. Oh, you got some more names to write down and more names to look for. But after about 4 or 5 years of doing this, I only had about 10 records, and I hardly knew anything. But I wrote a book of short stories. It won a prize, £3,000 to be spent on edifying foreign travel. I was probably meant to go to the Sorbonne.
And he came to Texas.
Study symbolist poets. But you're right, I came to the Broken Spoke. And the love that I had for Texas, for Bob Wills, it blossomed, and I realised there were not just half a dozen great bands, there were hundreds of great bands. There was still a scene here if you knew the right places to look as well. It wasn't always easy to find the good stuff, but it is there if you know where to look.
And have you found people here welcoming that you're interested in that music, or have you felt ever any kind of resentment that some foreigner was trying to take over our music?
Well, if anyone did resent it, they've been far too polite to say it. I can honestly say, I have been given a fantastic hospitality, a fantastically warm welcome. People have been very generous with their time, with records, with tapes, with their memories, even just hanging out and shooting the breeze, you know. And that is as true. My first visit in 1995 as it has been these past few days. We went up to the Tommy Duncan Festival in Hillsborough, Texas, and were made so welcome by Tommy Duncan's family. I mean, we just sent them an email, said, can we come from Scotland? And they didn't just say, yes, tickets are $20. They said, yeah, come to our house, have some chili. Do you want to go see where Tommy was born? You know, it's just absolutely wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Texas.
So will there be a follow-up to Lonestar Swing?
Will there be? I wish there could be. I mean, you know what it's like, Ed, I'm sure you write a book. I wrote that book after a 3-month trip around Texas. I wrote it with all my heart, with everything I knew at that time. Of course, a week after you send it away to the printer, you learn something else. You find another new record, you hear another great band. You can never be definitive. I guess there are scholars out there trying to be definitive, but that book is my account of my travels around the state and all the fascinating things I found. I'd like to write a book about Thomas Fraser, really. The play is the show. It's a storytelling show. We're not actors. We don't act the part of Thomas Fraser. Good morning, Thomas. Good morning, Minister. We don't do that. You know, we tell the story through music and through yarns. But there's enough in there for a couple 100 pages of a book, I think.
Well, we'll talk about the show in a minute, but I think it's time for more music. Okay. Some unemployed musicians back here.
Well, we've got a choice. It's a very hard choice, this. We could either give you a traditional Shetland fiddle tune, or we could give you a Bob Wills tune.
Okay, it's a vote. How many for the Shetland fiddle? How many for Bob Wills? I think you're going to have to do one of each.
Let's do Bob Wills first. Get me back to Tulsa. Okay, folks, I'm sure you'll know this one. You've probably heard it several thousand times if you ever go near a dance hall. This song, Take Me Back to Tulsa, was first recorded exactly 70 years ago, start of February 1941 in Dallas. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, see that girl with the red dress on, some folks call her Dinah. Stole my heart away from me, way down Louisiana. So take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take it! Well, we travel all across this land, playing by the hour. Always wear a great big smile, never do look sour. So take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young for the fiddler. Well, the little bee sucks the blossom and the big bee gets the honey. Poor man picks the cotton and the rich man gets the money. So take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Mandolin! To go to Tulsa, you bet your boots I would. Drop me off at Archer and I'll truck on down to Greenwood. So take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back, take me back, take me back to Tulsa. Take me back to Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me home.
You do realize if you're going to play this kind of music, you're going to have to get the right clothes. You're going to have to get some boots, a bolo, and a hat. You cannot play this music without wearing a hat. He mentioned a Shetland fiddle tune. Shetland is probably the most famous place anywhere in the British Isles for fiddle music. I don't know, is there anyone in Shetland that does not play the fiddle? It's, yeah, it's sort of like Cape Breton in Canada. There's just a fiddle player under every stone or under every bar stool. There's tremendous tradition. Some people thought that it was so strong because it was such an isolated place that it developed there and was not touched or affected by other events in the world. Along in the mid-1970s, a major event happened in the North Sea, which was the discovery of oil. And Shetland, over the next few years and continuingly, is one of the biggest oil terminals is in the islands there. And people thought, my God, all these Americans and other people coming in and all this money, it's going to completely kill the local culture. In many ways, the opposite has happened. The money that has come into Shetland, which is partly autonomous, has been invested in a lot of local halls, places where fiddle music can be taught, where dancing can be taught. And in many ways, the local culture has been strengthened by that influx of financial support. So I'm delighted that that has happened. You've got the Orkneys and the Shetlands, both have each has one of the most celebrated folk festivals in Scotland. In fact, the Orkney Festival, I think, won Best Festival in Scotland prize this year. So lots of people are going there to hear and learn music. They do not have to come from the islands to the mainland to learn. They've got plenty of their own, as you'll hear right now.
Actually, very fittingly, after that story about the oil and the preservation of the fiddle music in Shetland, that was actually down to one man, really, in particular, a guy called Tom Anderson, who was an insurance salesman, and he used to travel around, and we'd take his tape recorder in the back and record all the old fiddle players, and managed to get a bank of these old tunes. And when the oil money became available, he wanted to place fiddle teachers in schools, and he did that in the 80s. And my generation grew up with 3 traditional lessons in schools, so we're very grateful to Tom. And this is actually one of his tunes called The Slocket Light.
I assure you that all Shetland tunes are not as slow and beautiful as that. There's lots of great dance music as well. And a lot of the dances, well, you only have about 2 hours of daylight in this winter. So there's a lot of evening dances held. If you're interested in Shetland fiddling, then there are records of Tom Anderson still available. Probably his best-known pupil was Ali Bain. I think some of you, if you listen to Across the Water, you'll hear Ali occasionally with Phil Cunningham. Other people you would look for would be Chris Stout, who's kind of pushing the music in different directions these days. There's also a woman called Katrina MacDonald. And there was a fiddle player from this side of the Atlantic called Pam Swing, who actually did her graduate degree in the folklore department here at UT in Shetland fiddle music, mainly looking at the work of Tom Anderson. However, if we could move on to the actual play that's going to be at the Basque Concert Hall the next 3 nights, and I hope you all have your tickets or will be getting your tickets. Can you tell us how it's laid out and what part the audience can play in it?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, and I hope this doesn't put you off, it's actually very like what we're doing right now. How do you tell the story of a shy Shetland man who loved music? Well, you maybe recreate the kind of environment that he liked to play his music in. It was in the kitchen or around the living room fire of his croft in Borough. You know, maybe 1 or 2 friends would come round. One might have a fiddle, maybe an accordion. He would get his guitar out. They'd have pots of tea. He would rather have had harder stuff, but his wife Phyllis kept him in line. If she didn't keep him in line, he had a tendency to fall quite far off that line, so she was probably a good thing she did. And as you said, it's a long, dark night. That can be quite a good thing, though. When you look out the window, you don't know if it's 7 p.m. or if it's 3 in the morning, because it's pitch black the whole time. Once you get a good going session going, the tunes flow one into the next, the yarns follow one after the other. Before you know it, it's 3 in the morning. So the show is not really a play with us playing parts. It's really a recreation of a Shetland session. You know, we tell the story of Thomas's life through yarns, through memories about him. And I've picked tunes that he recorded, some of them many times over. They must have been favourites of his. And it always seemed to me that he'd recorded tunes at certain times in his life that reflected things that were going on in his life. When he was married and just newly married, very happy, had a baby, he recorded a lot of happy tunes. Other times when more tragic things were happening in his life, he recorded sad songs. It was as if he was exploring his own emotions and coming to cope with them by singing these sad songs. So our show rolls out over the course of about 1 hour and 20 minutes, I think, telling the story of Thomas's life. And it all gets a bit intense and emotional. There will be tears as well as laughter. So at the end, after the play is finished and Thomas is safely dead, we play a bit of music for another 20, 30, 40 minutes, but just for fun this time, for dancing, for listening to, for drinking to, whatever you fancy.
He really sounds like this, a subject that a folklorist stroke psychiatrist could go to town on. The music he played represented his own emotions and feelings. You keep mentioning the tragedies of his life. Can you talk more about that? Were there any specific things, or is it too personal?
Well, I don't. It's in the show really, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
You'll have to come tomorrow. Yeah.
It was to do with illness, death of family members, spouses disappearing, accidents, near-death experiences at sea, all that kind of thing. I mean, the life in those days before the oil came to Shetland, it was for a fishing community. It was a life of really grinding poverty and danger. You had to be really, really tough to survive there. And Thomas wasn't tough. One of the hard things he struggled with is when he was a child, he suffered from polio. And that semi-crippled him all his life. But you couldn't show your weakness, It was probably like being a cowboy out in the Western Plains somehow. If you had a problem like that, you never talked about it, you never showed your weakness, you tried to kind of compensate by being tougher in other ways. And so he struggled all his life. He internalized all these things. These days, he'd have gone to a therapy group about it.
Well, it sounds like the music was entirely therapeutic for him, though. Yeah. Tomorrow is the premiere, the world premiere?
Well, it's the US premiere. We've already
yeah.
done it in Scotland and Ireland, but very proud to be doing the premiere here in the Bass Hall, that little old village hall of yours.
So where are you taking it after this?
It's a 5-week tour around the States, and basically it's a week in each of 5 cities. We go up to Purdue, Indiana next, big university town there. Then we go to Chicago. Hey, it's going to be nice and cold up there, isn't it? We're going to feel right at home. We can't cope with the heat you've got down here at the moment. We go across to Pennsylvania, and finally, in the middle of February, we end up in Tallahassee, Florida. Back to the warmth yet again.
Singing to the crocodiles, yeah. Yeah, I did check the temperatures in Shetland just out of interest if you plan on going there. And it is recommended by the Small Planet tourist organization as one of the top 10 destinations if you want peace, solitude, and unspoiled environment. There you go. The temperatures vary from 40 to 60 for highs in summer, but they only vary from 35 to 45 in the winter. So there's nothing really cold and nothing really hot. And there's no trees to hide behind.
So they've all been blown away.
Mm-hmm. A few years ago, Scotland was one of the countries chosen to be represented at the National Folk Festival on the Mall in Washington, D.C. If you've ever been in Washington, D.C. in July, you'll know how fresh and cool it is. It was 103 degrees. There were several artisans and artists and performers from Shetland, and I've never seen people nearer death in my life. Cynthia, would you like to say a few things about the National Theatre of Scotland and the connection that you're trying to make between that and the Bass Concert Hall? Can you get the microphone? Cynthia Patterson.
Okay. Well, some of you may have been lucky enough to see Black Watch, which was performed by National Theatre of Scotland on Bass Concert Hall stage last year. And so this year, once again, we've converted the stage in a very different way. And it's our hope we've created a town hall. Would that be right? A village hall. And so those of you who know the concert hall stage won't recognize it. But it's very sweet and it looks great. So normally Bass Concert Hall, which seats close to 3,000, our capacity is 150 for this show. And there are 4 performances, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, and a matinee on Saturday afternoon. And there are very few tickets left, if I might say that. But in addition to that, and to answer your question, Ed, we've started sort of a long-term relationship with National Theatre of Scotland, we hope, a marriage of sorts. And so we just are eager to see what they offer us from year to year, and we're working on something very special for next year as well. But mostly we're very excited to have the United States premiere of Long Gone Lonesome, which our director, Kathy Panoff, lobbied for very hard, I think. And I think that's about it.
Oh, thank you. Can we bring our own beer tomorrow night? Is it BYOB?
No, we have bars on stage. No. And we have a lecture at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Only one lecture, a pre-show lecture at 7 o'clock. And this is not interesting for the podcast because it will be in the past. But Neil Murray, the director, the executive producer from National Theatre of Scotland, is giving the lecture. And you can get your drink and then scurry to your seat and enjoy the lecture. And then, but again, for that village hall feel, please drink. And then there will be a prize drawing before the dance, before the Lonestar Swing Band plays their music, as Duncan referred to.
Great. Well, I'd like to hear some more music in a minute or two, but can you see are there any of you who have specific questions for any of the members of the band or for Duncan in particular? They're as shy as Thomas Fraser. Roger.
I'm just curious are there recordings of Thomas Fraser that you would recommend from those tapes that have been made that are possibly available to the American audience?
There are now 5 CDs that have been released. Certainly, if you go to thomasfraser.com, you'll find full details there. That's run by Thomas's grandson, Carol, who discovered the tapes. We have brought, or the National Theatre has brought over his CD called Long Gone Lonesome Blues to be available at the venue on the nights that we're doing the show. And that's a very good place to start. To be honest, the standard over all of them is good. I have favourite tracks on all of the albums, but if you're coming to the show, you can get that there. If not, look on the web.
I actually played a track from it on the radio show a couple of weeks ago and said, introduced it, I said, well, all I'm going to say about this singer is he's not American. And I had several calls saying, come on, that's Jimmy Rogers, or that's Hank Williams. But it was Thomas Fraser from Shetland. Any other questions? You had Rebecca.
I'd like to know about how you got the band together. What was that process
Oh,
like?
yeah, well, I loved my times in Texas in the late 90s. When I went back home to Orkney, there were no Western swing bands there, not surprisingly. There were no Texas shuffle bands. And I thought, well, if I want to hear this music, I'm going to have to play it myself. Dick was in a quite innovative band already, the Smoking Stone Band, who blended traditional Orkney music with bluegrass. And I thought, there's something there. Scottish and American, it's already going on. So I started posting him cassette tapes of Bob Wills' greatest hits. Bob Dunn on the steel guitar. I would post one down to him every few weeks. Eventually he got intrigued enough to ask me why I was sending these things. I said, I want to start a Western swing band. And what you don't know about these instruments Dick's playing is that he actually made them himself. So when I said, we've got to have stand-up bass, and I can do the guitar and sing a bit, but it'd be good to have a steel guitar. But no one plays steel guitar in Orkney. Dick said, I'll make one. And he did. And eventually he's going to learn how to play it as well, and then that'll be even better. So we've been playing the music at weddings, dances, pubs, clubs, festivals, mostly in Orkney, occasionally beyond, but almost entirely in Orkney. I mean, like Thomas Fraser, we all have jobs. We're not full-time musicians. It's been a hell of a job getting off for 5 weeks, I can tell you. I haven't had a day off for the past year in order to get this 5-week tour. So we're not professional musicians. We do our boring day jobs, and then the fun comes in the evenings or at the weekends when we can get together and play for a dance. There's nothing better than that. When we formed the band, we thought we'd better come up with a name for it, and well, what could be more obvious? We're playing kind of swing music, and it's music from Texas. Let's call it the Lonestar Swing Band. Perfect, easy, everyone can understand that. Of course, what in Orkney in Scotland seems like a nice little ironic joke, when you actually come to the Lone Star State claiming to be the Lone Star Swing Band, suddenly you're in very dangerous territory, aren't you? There's 5,000 swing bands out there who can play it better than us, but we do it with heart and soul and with love, so that's what we bring to the table. Best we can do.
Any more questions or comments? Wow.
Who's coming to see the show? And what attracted you to see the show? What was it? Was it the yodeling? And are you still coming, having heard us play tonight? Yeah? You haven't been put off? I went to, some of us went to the Broken Spoke last night, and there was a Don Waltzer tribute, a reunion with his band.
Best to the best.
And God, I would love to have seen Don Waltzer yodeling and Thomas yodeling together. They would have, what a time they would have had, what a noise they would have made. Fantastic.
The Pavarotti of the Plains, he was called, yes. I hope many of you saw Don when he was alive and well and singing around Austin. Wonderful. Definitely the best yodeler I have ever heard. Mm-hmm. Right, well, if nobody's got any more questions, I'm going to make a request that perhaps we could have a Shetland fiddle tune, an upbeat one, and then finish off with a Western swing tune. Is that possible? And please use the top of the tables if you feel like dancing. Maybe you could say a couple of words about the language in Shetland.
Is this speaking about the Shetland dialect?
Yes.
Yeah, in Shetland we all learned how to speak properly, but the rest of Scotland are still trying to catch up. But we have a dialect that's kind of unusual. Instead of saying me and you, we say you, do and dee. So if I was meeting somebody that I hadn't seen for a while, I'd say, "Oh, how's they getting on? How's they doing?" And some strange, unique words, like instead of saying small, we say piri. And just a lot of some of them are old Scottish English words that have kind of carried on into Shetland. But these tunes are actually for the island that I grew up on, the island of Yell, although I now live in Burra. But the names of these tunes will give you a flavour for the dialect. The first one is called Lady Atty. Actually, no, the first thing is the ferry reel. The second tune is Lady Atty, and that means to lie down and have a sleep. The last tune is Miss Spencer's reel. So this would be played for an old-fashioned Shetland reel or Fuller reel. So we'll play these for you. These are very old tunes, by the way.
Does that not make you want to go to Shetland? Yeah. Before we hear a last song, I want to thank you all for coming. First of all, thank you for being loyal KUT listeners and keeping good radio going in Austin, i.e. non-commercial. You would not hear this kind of, well, I was going to say you're not going to hear this kind of music on commercial radio. Even Bob Wills, I'd challenge you to find that on a commercial station in Texas. But you will on KUT. And if you're listening Sunday night, it's not going to be any of this. It's going to be all Robert Burns songs to celebrate the upcoming birthday. But
yeah. Where can we find a haggis in Texas? We want to celebrate Burns Night. We can't get a haggis anywhere. We tried to import them and we were told it was illegal.
It is. The only way you can get a real haggis here is to kill the sheep yourself. Although there is a guy in Fort Worth that manufactures haggis, but it's not the real thing. even makes vegetarian haggis as well. There's an oxymoron for you. But thanks to Rebecca and Amy, thanks to Seth and all the sound guys, and particularly thanks to you for coming in and sharing this conversation. I hope many of you will come to the show over the next 3 days, but take it away, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Ed, and thanks to everybody for coming. We thought a suitable thing to finish with would be a song about beer. Does anybody like beer? This is Brews and Views, after all. Now, this is not Lonestar beer and Bob Wills music, but it is our tribute to both beer and the great country and western swing music that we love so much. It's one we wrote ourselves. It's called Barbed Wire Beer. 1, 2, 3, 4. Robert's Western World, I said I'm glad I'm here. I've come to hear some honky-tonk and drink you barbed wire beer. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. Frosted glass to cool my ass and a bottle of barbed wire beer. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. How can I fail? Foot on the rail and a bottle of barbed wire beer, yeah! Feeling hot and dry, it'll get you cool and wet. It makes you sing like you just smoked 2 packs of cigarettes. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. Frosted glass to cool my ass and a bottle of barbed wire beer. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. How can I fail? Foot on the rail and a bottle of barbed wire beer, yeah! Down to the Broken Spoke, I said I'm glad I'm here. I've come to hear some Texas swing and drink you barbed wire beer. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. Frosted glass to cool my ass and a bottle of barbed wire beer. Barbed wire beer, barbed wire beer. How can I fail? Foot on the rail and a bottle of barbed wire beer, yeah! Ian's put in a request for Take Me Back to Tulsa. We already did that one. Oh, how about a song by another great Texas musical hero of mine, Ray Price? Mm-hmm. My voice is going a bit croaky. I think it's, I've been told it's the cedar fever. So this will definitely have to be the last one. I'll get Ian to sing some harmonies on this one. It's a very familiar tune by the great Ray Price. It's quite fitting doing this. I'm told that his real ambition in life was to be an opera singer. I didn't know that today, but we got the chance to sit in Nashville with a guy who was his steel guitar player for about 15 years. His ambition in life was to be an opera singer. So it's strangely fitting doing the show in the Bass Concert Hall. Nice opera venue there. And we're playing honky-tonk music in it. Is it in F?
I don't know. You'll tell us what which song is it?
Crazy Arms.
Oh.
It's kind of like telepathy between me and the band. You know, we've been playing for so long. They can read my mind. Crazy Arms, it's in F. Ian plays the bass in this one, Linda plays the fiddle, and you play the steel mandolin.
I do?
Yeah.
That's right. There you go. That sounds
I need a bottle of barbed wire beer. Let's sing this song and get to the bar. 1, 2, 3. Well, blue ain't the word This ain't no crazy dream, I know that it's real. You're someone else's love now, you're not mine. Crazy arms that reach to hold somebody new. Why my yearning heart keeps saying you're not mine. My troubled mind knows soon to another you'll be wed. But that's why I'm lonely all the time. So please take these treasured dreams I had for you and me, and take all the love I thought was mine. Someday these crazy arms may hold somebody new, but right now they're lonely all the time. Crazy arms that reach to hold somebody new. Why my yearning heart keeps saying you're not mine. My troubled mind